In the first letter of John, the writer argues that those who possess genuine love have God's life in them. Moreover, these people must be well acquainted with him, while those who do not have genuine love can have no real knowledge of him, because God is love. If you take a quick survey online, it's not difficult to find any number of people who claim to be modern day prophets, people who hear from and speak for God. The problem with listening to these people is that you're separated from them by a vast technological chasm. There's no way for you to know if their life is marked by love or a real knowledge of God. During the period where my family attended a church in Oxford, England, I requested the opportunity to teach the church. The pastor that I spoke with responded that before the leadership would let me teach, the people of the church needed to see, know, and hear my heart. To see, know, and hear of my desire for and devotion to Jesus. To test whether I really knew him. In our attempts to understand how God speaks to us and how he guides us, it is of single importance to hold on to the fact that hearing God and knowing his will can only be consistently done as part of a certain kind of life. This kind of life is one that is marked by a desire for and a devotion to Jesus. This fellowship leads to a true desire to love and serve our fellow Christians and the wider world, and a quality of character that is visible and, while not perfect, is turned towards faithfulness. People can see our love of God in what we do. So we must never forget that God speaking to us is intended to draw us into that sort of life. It's intended to be an intelligent, freely cooperative relationship between mature people who love each other with the richness of a genuine love. So we must make it our primary goal, not just to hear the voice of God, but to grow into those sorts of mature people. The subject of this video lesson is to highlight 4 guidelines to help us move in that direction. The first guideline, as mentioned above, is to have a real love for God. But here I need to make a clarification. This love is not really an emotional or romantic type of love that we often associate with our relationships here on earth. It doesn't begin with our seeing God as some person to love, but seeing God as the source of life that we pursue. Out of that, just like a child will experience a gushing pleasure in seeing what is needed and helping his or her parent in something that parent desires to do, and how this involvement brings about an expansion of the child's self through immersion in the life and tasks of their parent, one to whom they are wholly abandoned. When we seek God as the source of life, it's really an attempt to get to know God, to participate in what we know is important to him, to understand and act on what we already know. And as we do this, to open ourselves up to an expansion of ourselves by hearing him more clearly. Guideline 2, prior to any successful communion with God, we need to understand that our life experiences are exactly like those people who experience God in Scripture. We can tend to consider people like Abraham and Moses, Peter and Paul, and see them in them a special manifestation of God in their lives. And we think that just can't happen to me. I'm not that sort of person. But what you need to know, or what you seem to think, is that your humanity is getting in the way of you knowing and interacting with God. And we seem to forget that these people in the past had a similar normalness as you. We need to be able to see how the experience of those in Scripture are basically the same types of experience as present people would have if we were in their situation and circumstances. So the ways that God interacts with those in Scripture can help enlighten how God may interact with you now. So the second guideline is to grow in your understanding of the way God interacted with people in Scripture. Thirdly, you need to learn to know, accept, and dwell in the experiences of God's presence and speech when they come. When God speaks to you, to rest in it. See, God's greatness is such that he can plan his story around you or anyone and everyone else he chooses. So throw away the misconception that you're not enough to be involved in God's work. That said, then, when you sense that God is present or speaking to you in the moment, recognize and accept that it is because he is folding you into his story and giving you what you need to know in order to be part of it. So when you get that sense, stop, listen, accept it, and then act. Finally, the fourth guideline is this, that recognize that God speaking to you does not prove that you are righteous or right. In fact, that sort of unhealthy pride is the exact opposite of the character that is required to hear from God. Meekness is the real preference for hearing God. It is a holy habit of mind that opens your whole being to the impression of his presence. What this means then is that when God leads, it is often through swaying your judgment to be in line with who he is and what he wants, rather than a confirmation of who you are and what you want. It is not frequently or direct a download of clear information out of which we can assume our own correctness or uprightness. Rather, it is an impression that requires our shifting and changing and molding towards in order to truly understand and accept. Those are the guidelines. So this week, as you spend time in communion with God, remember to present yourself to God as you are in the moment, real and unfiltered. As you do, let God's presence with you and your being with God in that moment open you up to his gentle influence and encouragement, his correction, his rebuke or direction. Trust that as he has led others in the past, he will lead you, and be willing to take action to join him in what you sense he is doing. God bless, and I'll see you next week.